Joe Budden shoots at Charlamagne?
Charlamagne and what iHeart was able to do for him.
Shout to Doc.
Joe, don't do
Y'all
that.
niggas is real lucky.
Joe, don't do that. Don't do that, because then people could say that about what you and
Something.
Spotify and what Spotify did for you.
It wouldn't be the same as
It doesn't matter. It's what people
they
could
did.
say.
They would lose, E.
I'm asking you what they did.
They would lose.
I don't know.
amplification is what he's trying to say.
They amplified his name, and they put him on they backed up his name.
That's right, Joe. On the Patreon, Joe Budden made some crazy comments about Charlamagne, and I'm here to break it down. So this Patreon was all about pod trades and the value of other podders compared to that of the people on the Joe Budden podcast. And Charlamagne came up during a trade, and Joe Budden said some crazy things. One of those being that he feels like iHeart gave him the visibility of, being the top radio guy. Seems like a crazy shot to me, and I must say it's a bit haterish. Now, I am firmly in the camp of Magneto, aka Joe Budden, and I really think Charlamagne was promoted by the infrastructure of radio. But to say that is to underplay Charlamagne's crazy legacy in the game. First of all, he came in the game under Wendy Williams, learned the trade, and then set fire to the New York City landscape, disposing of his ops like Rosenberg, Ebro, and R.I.P. Mr. C. On top of that, he also did local radio. So for Joe to talk to Charlamagne like this is a little bit wild. This is a guy who climbed the corporate ladder, and we can't talk about the 2010 to 2015 Charlamagne. This guy was special. I mean, this guy was sniffing seats. He was cursing Drake out. He launched the Brilliant Idiots and launched the careers of Andrew Schultz, Horrible Decisions, and many other in the podcast industry. Deezus and Murrow, Tax Stone. I think this is just unfathomable for Joe to suggest that Charlamagne is not only, but a big reason of his success was because he was on iHeart. He still had to be really good. It's kind of like the Drake UMG situation. People saying UMG made Drake hot by pressing the button, but Drake still had to make the music. And same with Charlamagne. He still had to make the compelling content. He still had to make sure people would tap into the radio show. And this wasn't the only time Charlamagne was disrespected, because there's a point in the trade conversation, someone suggests, we should trade Joe Budden for Charlamagne. And Ian Dunlop steps in and says, I would trade Joe for Charlamagne if I could get Joe Rogan too.
Prime Charlamagne, prime Rogan.
Damn, that's the 2-on-1.
God damn.
What are you talking about? There's no way you can say that Rogan and Charlamagne is worth a Joe Budden. Rogan himself is worth a Joe Budden. I know Ian Dunlop's going to play the culture card. Oh, but you don't understand what Joe did for the culture. I get it. But Rogan is Rogan, dog. Rogan is Rogan. Tom Brady, baby. 6 chips. Maybe more. I might got that wrong. But he's the man with a plan. $200 million deals, turning them down. Joe Budden, $22 million deals, turning them down. You see that? You see that value? 22 million, 200 million. And I know you're going to say it's the complexion and all of that stuff. I understand that. That is very true. But, man, if Joe Budden was pulling in Rogan numbers, he would have got that 200 million. I'm sorry. He's just not. Granted, he has a great infrastructure. He has a cast that has built some of the greatest podcasts. One could argue Rogan might have taken some of the Friends Who Pod swag from Joe Budden. That's a theory I've heard, not a theory I agree with. Just wanted to throw that out there as to why Ian said you needed to trade Rogan and Charlamagne to get a Joe. It sounded asinine, honestly, and sounded like pandering. But the bigger comments was Joe Budden saying that Charlamagne got to where he got to with the visibility of iHeart. Oh, that's cold. You cold-blooded devil, you, Joe. I wonder how Charlamagne will respond. We all know Charlamagne is extremely sensitive. Most people who rise to the top of the industry are. And I suspect he will take some thinly veiled shots, or maybe not some thinly veiled shots, at Joe. And we will have another chapter in the Joe Budden Charlamagne war. And it could be a trigger for Joe and Charlamagne to go again, so Joe can boost the interest in his Patreon, paywall a couple things. I see what's going on, man. I know what's happening. It's first quarter. A lot of people talk about fourth quarter, but first quarter is important. It sets the tone. And especially after a weak-ass fourth quarter by the JBP, Joe needs to ratchet it up. And man, if this goes any further, if this blows up and Charlamagne starts to get on his warpath, we're going to see what happens. But I mean, Charlamagne is so peaceful nowadays. I listen to the Breakfast Club, and Charlamagne really is just now more of a segue person. He'll give his input. He won't really go too left. I mean, he'll bash people who are like Drake. He'll bash Drake because, hey, who's not bashing Drake? It's fun to bash Drake now. But anybody else in the industry, he's not really touching it. You know, he's not really going there all the way. And he has too many political connects. He's a network owner. He's a TV show producer. He's a book writer. He's doing so much that I don't think Joe and him engaging is something he wants to do. And never mind, the last time that Joe and Charlamagne really engaged, Joe was threatening to go some serious places. And I don't think Charlamagne wants that. But let me know what you think in the comments. What do you think about Joe Budden saying that Charlamagne, his visibility was accelerated by the iHeart infrastructure, the biggest radio conglomerate in the country that has over, hundreds, probably like 500 radio stations. I got to research that number. And that's why he was able to gain the mass following that he did. Or I guess Joe, in comparison, had to get it out the mud. He had to go to Hot 97, and they told him to get off Hot 97 because he had to worry about his rap career. And he also had to find and completely pay for studio time, or, do a lot of the back end stuff. All of the stuff Charlamagne didn't have to do. And we'll see where we go from here. But tap in with Joe's Patreon. Interesting episode. I think I'm going to cover the pod trade segment on my own Patreon because I don't think it was that interesting. So I'm going to have to spruce it up a bit, and I'm going to leave that for the patronies. All right, y'all. Follow me on Instagram, The Stop TV. Follow me on Twitter, The Stop TV. Also, subscribe to my Patreon, The Stop. This is Danny from The Stop. Peace.